live. Welcome back, Sam Horse from T-Ball, man.
I didn't ask. How did the playoffs go for T-Ball?
Runner on second and first. 2 outs. Bottom of the third, Ben Ruffino. Line drive right back up the middle. And the Blue Wave would go back in, get 3 up, 3 down. And we are on to the second round of the T-Ball playoffs, baby.
Oh, okay. I can't imagine many kids can catch a line drive, by the way. So as soon as you said line drive, they can.
Double pause. Ben hit a line drive into right over the shortstop's head, and a girl caught it.
Well, was it like a real catch, or was it like
no
ball landed right in her glove?
Like ball in glove. She squeezed it. No, dog. These kids can play, brother.
Never mind.
Yeah, and Ben was pissed.
Oh, I can imagine if you smoke a ball like that. When's the next game? I know that we already skipped
Friday.
The intro, but...
Friday.
Okay. Well,
and,
we're rooting for you.
I might be going to scout tomorrow.
Oh, you're gonna go break it down.
I'm going full Congo Stallions. I'm going full Congo Stallions for the show. I mean, God. Why not? Why not? I mean, listen. Here's the thing. I know that this sounds like a joke. You know that I said this with our good buddy Chris Phillips.
Yep.
I don't know if I have not had more fun in sports because they won last night, a playoff game. The look on their face was like, you know, Joe, it's like the first time when you win something in competition and you're really playing something against other people. Dude, you ain't been able to tell Ben Ruffino shit.
Oh, I bet.
No, we've been hitting all day.
Oh, he's locked in. He's fully locked in.
You have no idea, bud. and I'm getting chills like talking about this. I'm dead serious. Okay, I am dead serious when I say I've never taken more pride in a group of people getting better every single game and then them winning. Dude, it was I know this sounds dumb. They were the happiest group of kids because they overcame adversity.
I always love hearing from Southern parents of baseball players. Love T-ball. They take it unbelievably seriously. I love hearing you guys talk about this. We don't take it this seriously up here. Maybe that's why our athletics are not as good as they should be. Well, I'm not talking about Rhode Island. I'm talking about Jersey. But no, we don't take it as seriously. I wish we did. I wish we had that intensity for how old is he? 5?
He just turned 6. He turned 6 on May. Here's the thing. You know, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. He won't turn 7 until the next will be midway through the T-ball season. He's got to go back. He's got to keep him in T-ball. Can't go back. Can't go to the coach's pitch. So the little kid that's like demolishing the baseball and T-balls comes back next year.
Oh, they need to call him up.
Oh, hold on. No way. NIL, baby.
Oh, come on. You don't want to send him up to go smoke the older kids?
I do. But at the same time, if you're not going to let him do it, I'm not going to, hey, we're in the same age group. He's going to kill him.
All right.
We're looking for tier. By the way, hold on.
Yes.
Pause.
Yes.
I'm just going to leave this one very open-ended. There was some trash being talked by the other coaches on the other sideline. Yes.
What do you mean? Hold on. What are you talking about?
They were talking shit to me. They were talking shit to the other coach. I saw one of them at the.
What were they saying?
At the gym, like, oh, y'all are trying to cheat. And I'm like, buddy, I can count past 2, so I know that that's not 3 outs. Yeah, like it was bad. They were mad because Ben kept like demolishing the baseball, and I'm like, look, dude, it runs in his genes, baby. We're athletes around here.
Excuses. These other coaches making excuses.
You're damn right, Joe. You're damn right. We're going to the championship.
Not as bad as the Florida coach, which we obviously this isn't a baseball show, but
that one was the worst one. The Kevin O'Sullivan thing isn't the worst one. The Wake Forest calling
a lot of tempers flaring this week.
Yeah, baseball's intense. I'm telling you, you'd fall in love with it. I'm telling you. Because you love college sports too much, you would fall in love with it. It is
I mean, if Notre Dame was good, I probably would.
They are.
But they didn't make it. They didn't make the
Yeah, they fell down the stretch. But when Link Jerry went to Florida State, I mean, y'all got to a College World Series.
Yeah, before that they were pretty good, and then completely have collapsed since Link Jarrett left. So I mean, I've got nothing to root for. I mean, historically, there's been amazing football players that have played on the baseball team. Jeff Samardzija, I think Golden Tate played football or football.
Interesting thing about Jeff Samardzija. Paul Maneri, the LSU head coach, was at Notre Dame and coached Jeff Samardzija, and he went up to him one day. Paul tells the story that he told Jeff that he's too white and too slow to play receiver. He goes to the combine, runs a 4.5, and says, "I guess you're not that slow, but you still need a pitch."
He's one of my biggest what ifs, and I know I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole, but he's a huge what if for what he could have done if he chose to play football. Receiver.
Well, yeah. I mean, he did get paid like $45 million guaranteed.
Right.
Baseball money, stupid. Hummus says intense enthusiasm for youth sports is awesome, just as long as it doesn't cross the line. I fully agree with that. And look, on our videos, you'll see, because Ben loves seeing it, it's all about them developing, man. It's all about having fun. We lose.
Right.
But it's been a lot of fun. You know who might not have a lot of fun this year?
Who's that?
The Nebraska Cornhuskers. As we continue on our deep dive here, we're going to break down Matt Rhule's third team in the great state of Nebraska. Also, we'll talk about Greg Sankey. Listen, the Big Ten and the ACC firing off at the SEC, and Greg Sankey said, well, why are you out here canceling games then?
Sankey's been firing shots, and any chance that somebody's giving him a microphone to give a quote, he's not holding it. He's been holding punches for a bit, and he's been coming out swinging. I've got an interesting take on this when we
Here's one thing you can't say about Sankey. He didn't back down from the Big Ten, and he didn't back down from, hey, we lost in the playoffs this year. So what? We're going to respond and come right back. We don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right.
Right.
So we'll talk on Greg Sankey's comments. But, Joe, we got to talk about this. We did talk about it with Mike Leach and some of the other coaches. But the Hall of Fame, College Football Hall of Fame 2026 ballot is out. There's some big names on it. I'm just going to read off a couple here along with some coaches. We did talk about Mike Leach as well, but Cam Newton, RG3, Ndamukong Suh, Aaron Donald, Percy Harvin, Alan Faneca lead the ticket for the ballot. Brother, I don't remember this. Like, I don't remember like ballots and who was on what ballot. You mean to tell me that there's a better ballot out there than Ndamukong Suh, RG3, and RG3, Cam Newton, Percy Harvin, and Aaron Donald?
I have to be honest, I'm not like super familiar with when the eligibility starts, but you're 100% right. I mean, this is Mark Ingram's also on this ballot as well, and
right.
he hasn't gotten in there. The list of available players and also some of the coaches are pretty great. It's not like a super sexy coach list. Like Larry Coker was on there, Chris Peterson, Boise State, Washington head coach. Great
Larry
names,
Coker
but
doesn't belong in there, in my opinion.
Yeah, yes and no. He was a national champion coach, but didn't do a whole lot after that. But to this point, this list of players that we have, all the guys that you just named there are surefire guys. One that was surprising me, Eric Bieniemy, not being a player that's been inducted in the Hall of Fame that's on the ballot this year.
If you remember around the time that he got on the ballot the first time, he got in a little bit of trouble.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. So to not go down that rabbit hole, but remember the whole thing with the domestic dispute.
Right. I completely forgot about that.
Yep.
Also to add in there, Manti Te'o was also on the list. I think that he should be a guy that gets in this round because of what he did. He's one of the few Heisman runner-ups that was a defensive player. You can say all the crap that you want about his fake girlfriend and all that nonsense. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame at some point.
Okay. You talked about, regardless that he was just an absolutely really good player, you cannot talk about the 2000s college football without Manti Te'o. You can't do it.
No.
And unfortunately for him, it's got nothing to do with on the field.
Right. Sadly, it has nothing to do because of one of the most insane, unreal stories. We all watched the documentary that came out, I think it was 2 years ago, the whole fake girlfriend thing. But he was on one of the most historic Notre Dame teams. He was not the driving force for this, but that Notre Dame team was one of the driving forces for playoff expansion because they got their asses kicked so badly. But Manti Te'o had some of the most memorable moments in Notre Dame history that he produced in that season for Notre Dame. His stats were completely out of insane. If Johnny Manziel didn't exist and it was just like another standard year with like a bunch of good but not great quarterbacks, I think he would have won the award. I think he absolutely would have.
Yeah, the only bad thing is that whole game versus Bama and the way that he tells it is such a bad look.
You think the one game would be enough to keep Manti Te'o out of the mix?
No, I don't think so. Does he deserve to be in? Yes. But, man, just the way he got physically dominated, I think is a problem.
He was distracted. That was kind of what the whole talking point was, but I don't disagree.
I mean, you're right. The only time he got laid was at the Heisman when he put the lay over his neck. I mean, if we're just being honest.
Uh-huh.
All right. Yes, I could see him, but here's the truth. If there's any kind of rules, regulations, there's no way I put him over Cam Newton, RG3, and Ndamukong Suh, Aaron Donald. He was prolific, but here's the truth. Yeah. Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh had more disruptive years than he did, ever. Because you look at that last year, that senior year for Aaron Donald, the 29 tackles for loss, that is insanely stupid. Like, that is as disruptive as it's ever been. And Ndamukong Suh, having 12 sacks as an interior defensive lineman and having 20 tackles for a loss in a single season. I know you won't remember this, Joe, probably, and I don't mean this in a wrong way. That was my senior year, that whole year.
Yeah.
That Ndamukong Suh big push year with Bo Pelini and them. I got to be real with you. I thought he was the best player in college football that year. Because he just destroyed everybody and everything. And I wouldn't have been surprised if he won it. But then you go to Cam Newton.
Yeah.
I mean, one
of the greatest players to ever play. He's one of the most unreal athletes that we've ever seen. This is the first guy that, like, any article that you open up that's talking about, like,
and it should be.
Names to know.
And it should be. Yeah. Joe, name one offensive player that was on that national championship team.
Was Trey
You
Mason
can probably remember the running back. But there was nobody. Nick Farley was the other big name on defense.
That's right. And he stunk in the NFL. He was like super
actually went to the Saints and had a pretty productive career, believe it or not. He just had the
Lions.
He had the heart issues. Yeah.
Right.
But those four guys, and I got to tell you another one. I don't think you could tell the college football story from 2000 to 2010 without Percy Harvin and Tim Tebow at Florida. I don't think that exists.
This is going to be, I'm sure, bother people. Did Percy Harvin statistically have like enough to go off of? Or I kind of feel like he was one of those players that just kind of like rode off of the excitement of the big plays that he made. But like, were his stats really that exceptional?
I mean,
did he be worthy of being a first ballot guy?
19 rushing touchdowns and 13 receiving touchdowns in his career in 2.5 years, because he got hurt half a year.
Right.
He still scored 15 touchdowns.
I'm not saying he's not a Hall of Famer. I just don't know. Like, I think he'd be in the mix in the conversation.
You cannot tell that. You can't. I'm telling you. You go back and watch 2007 LSU versus Florida. You cannot at all tell the story of that Florida dynasty with Urban Meyer at Florida without Percy. It does not exist. By the way, the kick returns. So, like, you have a dude in Devin Hester that's in there. Now, he didn't break that record. Barry and Brown, by the way, has got to get one to break it, the all-time record at LSU this year, just FYI. But there also comes a point in time where, like, this dude was insanely talented. He started a wave of scat bags in college football. There was a massive wave.
He was one of those guys that, like, I kind of wish they did a little bit more in the NFL. My main point with him is that, like, he had a great career. I don't know if he was the best player on those Florida teams, which is kind of why he's one of those guys that just, like, we talk about because the highlights were so exciting. Like, you could put on his highlight tape. Anybody can sit down and watch Percy Harvin run past dudes every single play. He was insanely electric. He was insanely fast. I think that, though, that, like, he'd probably be the last on those list of those guys that you named. I believe last year's class was 16, so he's probably going to get in. I would just prioritize some of these other players. Mark Ingram for sure is one.
I don't think Mark Ingram had better seasons than Percy Harvin. I don't think they didn't.
I think it's pretty significant though that Ingram was Alabama's first ever Heisman Trophy winner, and it was a Heisman Trophy winner. It was one of the most prolific running backs in Alabama history. I think that should stand for something. That was the very beginning of what was the ascension to Nick Saban becoming one of the greatest coaches in college, or becoming the greatest coach in college football history.
Yeah,
I think
Mark was a great back.
He should be in there. He absolutely should be in there.
Percy Harvin had well over 5,000 yards in his career. So if we're going to go statistically.
In his college career?
Yeah, in his college career. If you do kick returns as well. Kick and punt returns. As all purpose. Because he had 3,781, and then the kick returns are a wholly different thing. Both of them deserve to get in. I don't think we should fight over the semantics of them getting in. They both deserve to get in. But there's another one. You know, Alan Faneca is actually in the NFL Hall of Fame, but not in the College Football Hall of Fame. So he's.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's in there. That's another one. Like, how do you keep him out?
I don't think that you can, and I think for that exact reason that you just.
Well, they kept him out last year.
It's always tough sledding for an offensive lineman. Like you need to be multi-time All-American,
which is so wild. He was.
Right, exactly my point. Like
he was to have what he has. He was a 3-year All-American, 2 or 3 year All-American. I mean, insane. And he's an NFL Hall of Famer. By the way, I saw a video today on YouTube of how they used to do the All-Americans. Did you know, like in the year like 1998 or whatever in the shit it was, Teddy Bruschi was a defensive end, and Pat Fitzgerald was the number 1 overall linebacker in that class as an All-American at Northwestern.
Was he really?
Yes. He broke his foot. He comes into the Hall of Fame, or comes into the All-American. They ran up with their uniforms in.
Oh, I remember the Bob Hope thing that he used to do.
Yes.
Yeah. I've seen those videos.
Pat Fitzgerald, he comes in there with the crutches. I'm like, some of these dudes, I have no idea who they are, though. Some of them, I was like, who in the hell is this?
Yeah, some of these guys disappeared into
the
total.
Ether.
Yeah, right. They just fell off the face of the earth.
Without a doubt. So, look, great class, great overall class. But I got to say something.
Yeah.
Joe, 29 tackles for loss for Aaron Donald.
I think a lot of people forget that Aaron Donald was not just an NFL dominant player.
Yes.
He actually fell in the draft further than he should have. A lot of people overthought him. He showed up at the Senior Bowl. He was dominant as hell at Pitt. He showed up at the Senior Bowl. Nobody could freaking block him. And he ends up getting drafted, I think, 13th overall by the Rams. And that ended up being the reason why the Rams were as good as they were over the last decade and a half.
Joe, even more than Ndamukong Suh, no one has been more disruptive as an interior defensive lineman since Warren Sapp, since Aaron Donald. I'm fully convinced. Like Chris Jones is not as disruptive. Chris Jones will take plays off.
No.
I mean, it's Joe. If he's got one more tackle for loss, he would have had 30 tackles for loss. That is stupid. And by the way, he played in a time in the ACC where the ACC actually didn't suck.
Right. He was going up against a pretty good offensive line.
Clemson won national title.
Yep.
Florida State won a national title.
Yep.
It's not like these dudes sucked, man.
It's comical, too, to pull up the awards that he had. The Nagurski, the Bednarik, the Outland, and the Lombardi. I don't think there's actually any other defensive tackles that have won all 4 of those awards. Like, you got to be, like, strapped. Like, you got to be completely cracked to be winning all 4 of those awards. And you just talk about it. I mean, the 29 tackles for loss is insane. It's completely nuts.
I mean, yeah, you got to be strapped like your Plexico Burris.
That's not what I was getting at, but.
All right. Let's get to it. All right. Everyone do us a favor. Hit the like and share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages, you're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, and wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, Greg Sankey taking shots, not at Quinn Ewers. Have you seen this?
Well, I mean, we've taken plenty of shots at Quinn Ewers, so we can't exactly act like
we didn't go out of our way to take shots at Quinn Ewers. when we talked about him, we would take a shot.
What were the shot? What did I miss?
Just basically about the whole Arch Manning deal. Like, we're putting down Quinn Ewers because of his coach's decision. If we want to get on anybody, it was Sark's decision not to play Arch, not the other way around.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I kind of get what you're saying, but at the same time, I just posted a clip on our TikTok of me saying I think Texas is going to be better now that Quinn Ewers is gone.
That's not a shot. That's not a shot.
Yeah.
But like saying that, like all this craziness, you don't have to put the dude down because you believe their team's going to be better.
It's fair. It's a fair point.
I mean, here's the truth. Quinn Ewers should have kept the mullet. I think he lost his superpowers. He lost his superpowers when he cut the mullet. He's like Samson in the Bible.
He wasn't as good. Yeah, he wasn't as good when he shaved it.
No,
he got too serious.
Yeah. You got to keep the party in the front, or business in the front and party in the back, baby. You can't tell me that.
He had it all.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Joe. So we've been talking about Greg Sankey over the last couple of weeks here. Tonight we got to go and do it again because he went on with Dan Patrick, which, by the way, if you don't watch the Dan Patrick show, I freaking love Dan Patrick. But regardless of that, Greg Sankey was asked by Dan Patrick in reference to some things that had been coming out, especially last week with the SEC spring meetings. Greg Sankey comes out and takes a shot at Wake Forest and Nebraska, saying that Nebraska canceling the home-and-home series with Tennessee seems soft to me, and also saying Wake Forest not going to fulfill the home-and-home after Ole Miss went up to Winston-Salem and then canceled it an hour before the game started, telling Lane Kiffin. He did come out and say this college football process is threatening the regular season. It's not supporting it. Well, no shit, because every time that you expand, you're going to hit it. You're a part of that. I don't want to hear that you're not a part of that. But there also comes a part in time where he ain't wrong. I mean, Wake Forest doing what they did and Nebraska backing out, I mean, they're not running. We talked about this with Notre Dame, Joe. What did we say? Notre Dame last year in the playoffs. Hey, you don't want to give us the top 4 spot? We don't get a bye? Fine. We don't care. We'll play anybody. Oh, you want to give us one now? Sounds good. Strap it up. We'll go. Greg Sankey's not backing down. And if we're not going to if we're going to give the same kind of pursuit of greatness for Notre Dame and doing that, we got to say the same thing for Greg. Nebraska canceling that is a bad look. Wake Forest doing that to Ole Miss is a bad look. That's not the SEC doing that. It's the Big Ten and the ACC.
Well, first of all, Sankey's very smart to bring this up amidst this whole battle over strength of schedule. There's a back and forth going on right now from Big Ten supporters, SEC supporters, Big Ten coaches, SEC coaches that are trying to prove this point of where is the real challenging schedule. I think that I've got a solution for this that needs to be implemented going forward for the 16-team playoff. For the 16-team playoff, I think to be deemed eligible, you should be required to play a certain amount of non-conference Power 4 opponents. I think that everybody should have to also play 9 in-conference games, and I think that they should have to play 2 non-conference Power 4 teams. And I'd even go as far as to say, I think that we should just stop scheduling FCS opponents. And look, this is coming from a former FCS player. I mentioned this recently on a different show. I know that
they're fun their athletics, though.
I know it is, but sadly, we're moving in a completely different direction. Scheduling a G5 team is fine because the G5 teams need ways to bolster their resumes. That is going to be very complicated. It's separate from what I'm pitching here. But I think if we have requirements for certain levels of opponents that you play, that prevents us from complaining about this. The recurring thing that gets brought up every single time, Blake, when we have this discussion, us or others, is that there's no continuity. There's no continuity in scheduling. Certain teams play 8 conference games, some play 9. Some play X amount of non-conference games against P4 opponents, some don't play any. And now we're starting to see examples where teams are just straight up canceling SEC opponents because of what they don't want to say. They want to have the best position to get into the college football playoff.
So you come out here and
you give them a reason.
So you come out here and blame the SEC for not wanting to challenge themselves enough, even for you to cancel the game then.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No, but that's what Greg Sankey is saying. It's essentially what he's saying. He comes out with this today and saying, listen, you complain about us not having 9 conference games. You complain about this. You complain about not having the 4-4-2-2-1+3 model. You're complaining about everything. Then why are you canceling games against us? It's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah.
So, Joe, everything that you're saying can be people can agree with you, and it can be accurate. The problem is he's saying, well, then why did you back down? And here's the solution. They seem as if that the Big Ten's like, well, if you're not going to move to 9 conference games and you're not going to go with the 4-4-2-2-1+3 model, that's a mouthful to say, pause. But if you're not going to go with that, we had the solution. The solution was, let's all meet up in the beginning of the season, play it, not a tournament, but we're going to all play against one another. Sounds good. And guess what? Half the teams in the SEC would have that same thing that you talked about because most of them have a rivalry with somebody in the ACC. Sounds good. I mean, if there's any conference that hasn't backed down from going outside their conference and playing teams, it's been the SEC.
Okay. I understand that. I understand that, and I do agree that that's the intention in the sentiment for why he's saying this. Like, he's trying to counter this whole discussion that people are criticizing the SEC's non-conference scheduling. Meanwhile, we're seeing the Big Ten and the ACC cancel matchups that they had with SEC opponents. Okay, so like I understand where he's getting at. I think what has now become silly, though, Blake, is that we're sitting in this world where it's shot after shot after shot from different people in different corners. From Petiti, from Yormark, from Sankey, from Brett Bielema. You see him chiming in. You have all these people. Lane Kiffin will chime in. You have so many people chiming in and just taking shots and bitching. Why don't we have a solution? Like, we need we need a proposed solution. There needs to be requirements for your schedule in order to be eligible for the college football playoff. What I pitched doesn't have to be it, but there should be requirements going forward. Once the 16-team playoff is agreed upon and decided upon, we have to have that going forward.
Well, then you'd have to make an addendum. You'd have to make an addendum for Group of 5 then, because there's no way that they could play Power 4 opponents. So then you're eliminating them, which they're not going to do. In the reality of it, you're not going to do that. So in theory, what you're saying is fine. The problem is it's not going to happen if you keep a Group of 5. And quite honestly,
they shouldn't be allowed in it anyways.
Quite honestly, I don't let's take the SEC and Big Ten and combine them for a second. If you're doing a 5+11 model, which it seems likely that with your mark, the ACC and the SEC agreeing on this, that they have the buying power. At the current problem, or the current solution, if it goes to 5 and 11, Joe, the ACC and the Big 12 really don't have a leg to stand on in reference to, if that's the requirement you make, 9 of their conference games is not created equally to the SEC and Big 10. So again, even though you're trying to do it, we're trying to do that for the SEC and the Big 10. We can't do it for the other conferences that we're going to allow into this. We can't. So again, I would just point out to the memo, then you would have to go 4-4-2-2-1+3 model if that's what you want to do.
I don't want to do that.
I don't either.
I think that, to your point, I'm not going to sit here and debate if the SEC schedule, the SEC standings,
I said combined,
are deeper. I know.
I wouldn't go in SEC now.
But I would argue what I'm saying, what my pitch here to you, that you have to play a certain number. I brought this up last show. You should have to play an ACC team, and you should have to play a Big 10 team. If you're an SEC team, you should have to play an ACC, a Big 12, and a Big 10 team.
Fine, let's do it.
Wait, so if to what you're saying, that shouldn't be a problem for the SEC, because SEC supporters, including yourself, have pointed out that the Big 10, the middle to the back end of the Big 10, and all these other conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, are a lot weaker than the SEC. Okay, so then this game that you're adding, these games that you're adding to the schedule, theoretically, should not be difficult opponents. Do you understand what I'm getting at here? That
sure, but then
you can't say that they're weak, but then not be willing to. I'm not saying that you're saying this. I'm saying this to SEC fans who would hate what I'm pitching, that you can't claim that the other conferences are weak and then at the same time say, well, we don't want to schedule games.
Well, hold on.
That.
I also have something in my back pocket that I'm about to pull out. Okay. They didn't have a win over the SEC this year, meaning the ACC and Big 12. Clemson literally went 0 for 3 against the SEC, the conference champion. So before we say that, hold on now. I got your conference champion get their teeth kicked in.
Wait, did Kentucky beat Louisville this year?
Oh, wait, was that 2023? All right, so Louisville beats Kentucky. So they have a win. But I got your conference champion literally getting their shit kicked in.
Arizona State beat Mississippi State this year too. I know that I'm not exactly picking the top teams, but
you get what I'm trying to say here.
Well, I understand what you're trying to say, but that's why
I should have. Let me say this: the top half doesn't have wins when it mattered. Clemson did not.
The real opponents, the real good teams in those conferences, the games that they scheduled with the SEC, they didn't beat them. Right, to your point. I just think, though, and the real problem is the anchor here that we have to maneuver around are the slappies that are the G5 teams. They shouldn't be a part of this. This would be a million times simpler if we didn't have the damn G5 team. I think to what you said of having a special rule, the G5, we should just have to create different criteria for them. And I don't know what that is. Like, they should have to schedule 3 Power 4 opponents with their non-conference games. They can't play FCS.
That'd be a mess. They get boat raced.
Well, if you're supposed to be as good as you claim that you are, like all these G5 teams,
here's the problem with that.
They should be able to compete.
Here's the problem. They can't do that. They'd have to go independent. Because if you're making the SEC, Big 10, ACC, and Big 12 play a Big 10 opponent, a Big 12 opponent, and an ACC opponent.
Oh, shit.
Again, it's you keep talking about all these maneuvers, but there's always a standstill. Here's the truth.
There's ways around that we could work.
Here's the truth. Here's what we need to do to move it forward for now. We can come back and change this once we see it play out. You got to let the conferences do what they want to do and then come together in the playoff. Because, Joe, it's at large. Because, hold on.
We can't do that. We're not adults in this matter.
Yes,
There's no adults that can act normal if the conferences do whatever they want.
They're not going to agree.
That's my whole point is that by going with that measure, you're just allowing for the chaos to be even bigger.
Well, then Indiana's got to play a tougher schedule, and you got to make sure
I don't disagree.
Okay.
I think that we need to have more difficult scheduling for every team. It
does feel as if that the burden is being pushed on the SEC, and for what? Because over a conference game, which, by the way, what does the SEC got to have a burden of proof for?
But this is my whole point: is that we can stop arguing that. We need to stop arguing that. We need to stop wasting our time talking about it because you're right. It's stupid. It doesn't mean anything. Nobody should be arguing the SEC is a weak conference and they're just kind of riding off the tradition. I think that is a terrible argument. Last year was still a year in which they had 3 teams on the bubble, and in the expanded playoff, all 3 of those teams would have gotten into the 16-team playoff. They would have had 7 teams, I believe, in the 16-team playoff. So as much as we want to shit on them, they still would have had the most competitive teams in a 16-team playoff field in 2024. I'm just trying to get at, we need to have some sort of rotating scheduling agreement. I don't know what it is, but we need requirements.
I think, to your point, then the Big Ten does not need to back out of playing the SEC in the beginning, and then we'll let the field decide. Because that's really, if we come down to it at the end of the day, Greg Sankey is not taking a shot at the ACC or Big 12. He's not doing it. He throws Wake in there, okay, but he's not taking a shot at the ACC. He's taking a shot at Wake Forest. What he's really trying to take a shot at is Tony Bettini in the Big Ten. Like, hey, man.
Yeah.
Okay. We get what you're saying. We can't get the backing from the ADs and the presidents of these universities to go to 9 games. Can't do it. They voted no again, Joe. So you can have that amendment all you want to. You can say whatever you want to. But the bottom line is the people that run our conference voted no. So, yes, that's why I said it's not just Greg Sankey that's got to say yes. He has bosses in the ADs and presidents of these universities. They voted in a 10-6 unanimous no. No. What is he going to do? He's got to go by their wishes. He doesn't have a choice. So Big Ten can complain about it, but there's nothing he can do. So either you're going to push the sport together and forward and let the conferences do what they want and come together. Let the best 16 teams win. Let's go find it out. Nothing stopping
Ohio
Ohio
State
State
that simple,
from winning
though.
the playoff.
I understand that. I wish it was that simple, and I completely agree with you that, like.
But why, let me ask you this question. Hold on. Why can't they make it that simple?
Because no matter, it is impossible. It is impossible. Somebody will always complain if there is not a level playing field. There is going to be no way with how many teams that are in the Power Four to be able to effectively determine if the playing field is level. There are, at the end of the day, always going to be teams with harder schedules. There are going to be teams with easier schedules. It happens in the NFL all the time where teams with easier schedules get to the playoffs and they show up and get their asses kicked. Daniel Jones took the Giants to the playoffs a couple of years ago when they should not have gotten there because they had a really easy, favorable schedule that year. I'm bringing this up to say that at the very least, they're all playing NFL teams. Every single game is against an NFL team. They don't schedule a UFL team. They don't schedule a European football team. They don't schedule a Canadian League football team. There's no random, the Roughnecks are coming into, or Rough Riders, or whatever the hell they're called. Oh, the Toronto Argonauts are coming into town for our bye game this week.
That's a bad comp.
I don't think it's a bad comp. My whole point is that, play against everybody that is going to be the best available opponents in the college football playoff.
It's a bad comp because everybody is in the same playing field for college. UFL, XFL doesn't have the capital, money, or resources to get a draft and go get Bo Jackson or Warren Moon.
But that's like a completely different player acquisition is player acquisition. The way that it happens in the sport, if anything, creates less parity.
Why is Patrick Mahomes playing with the
teams.
Kansas City Chiefs and not going and playing in the CFL?
Because there's more money.
Bingo.
But that's the exact reason why the best players pick the best teams in college football, because they're taking the most money. There's no draft.
I do feel like that. I do think when we have, because we got to get moving here. I do feel as if, though, Joe, that we're in a situation where that in college football with this group of five get into a playoff, that we're asking the Canadian Football League to go into the NFL playoffs.
This is what I'm getting at, is the scheduling is imbalanced and there's ways to fix it, but it requires creativity and it requires communication. And that's something that most of these stakeholders refuse to do.
Very true. All right. Let's move on here. Joe, we continue on our path in deep dives. Tonight we go to the great state of Nebraska. The 7-6 team, or were they 6-7? I don't remember. I think they were 7-6. Yeah, 7-6. 7-6 team from a year ago, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, looking to come in with the second year of Dylan Raiola and the third year of Matt Rhule. Joe, when you look at the Cornhuskers going into the season in 2025, how do you see things panning out?
My main area of focus is on Dylan Raiola. I don't think that this Nebraska team, and there's going to be a lot of comparisons between Raiola and Lagway because we're already seeing it. I don't think this Nebraska team is as talented as this Florida team, and we're going to be talking about them in a very different light. I have a lot of excitement. I have a lot of optimism for Dylan Raiola as a young, budding, promising quarterback. He didn't finish great down the stretch last year. But we saw lots of flashes of what he can be with a good roster around him when he's confident and when he's playing free. I really think that the driving force for their success, as we see a lot of times in college football, great elite quarterbacks can boost average teams. I see a team that's got talent that needs their young quarterback to lead them. I'm going to talk about their schedule a little bit later, but there is a really strong chance for this team, if things go according to plan with a couple of things that we'll dig into here, things go according to plan, like they're capable of being one of the top teams in the Big Ten this year. Probably not a playoff team, but still one of the better teams in the conference.
They do add some production here. Dane Key comes over from Kentucky, who, Joe, I got to be honest, I thought Mark Stoops did a really good job with Barian Brown and Dane Key, and they both hit the portal. Dane Key goes to Nebraska. Joe, if this kid and Raiola can get together, Dane Key had a damn good year last year with a quarterback that couldn't throw the ball further than 15 yards with any accuracy. He had 715 yards last year, which was his biggest season, but only 2 touchdowns. It will be very interesting to me now that I feel like that they have a guy who has shown that he can make productive plays against tough competition, what he can do with a quarterback that can actually throw him the football. The thing with me, though, offensively, and in the progression of Dylan Raiola, Joe, they're going to have to find a way to run the football at a much better clip. Listen to this. Last year, Nebraska was 96th in the country on offense in rushing. Joe, they had some games in there where, buddy, they were struggling to get to 50 yards rushing. 50.
That killed him.
Well, it also killed Dylan Raiola. He had 13 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Joe, I don't know with this offensive line. I know you bring in Elijah Pritchett at right tackle. There's a reason Elijah Pritchett moved on from Alabama. Great players don't leave Bama, brother. They don't. I don't mean that in a wrong way to Elijah Pritchett, but they're going to pay top dollar for big-time offensive linemen. They have done that for a decade plus, 2 decades. It's not going to happen. What can Elijah Pritchett be there? But, Joe, you got sophomores littered on that offensive line, either redshirt or true sophomores. And the question's going to be, how quickly have they developed? How experienced can they be? And do they know what they need to do in crunch time? Because if not, Raiola's going to be under pressure again. And, Joe, they cannot run the football. Now, normally in year 3, year 4-ish, this is where Matt Rhule starts to shine, right? This is where he starts to make his money. So this would be the year that you'll know that if Rhule can really take that step forward. John, I'm worried about their offensive line. I'm worried about them running the football, and I'm worried it affecting Dylan Raiola in a way that maybe statistically he's not one of the more upper echelon, but because he's on a team that can't protect him enough, maybe they don't take a step forward. That's number one for me offensively.
I definitely think that there's concern to be had with the O-line because I felt like that was where they fell short at times last year. Elijah Pritchett has talent, but as you mentioned, usually if a guy leaves Alabama, there's usually a reason. I think at the same time, though, them bringing in Rocco Spindler is very underrated. I think that he could be coming from Notre Dame, an experienced guy who just didn't fit into the lineup because they had a bunch of young guys that were going to step up and start over him. He can be a key contributor, a key piece for this offensive line getting better. I think that absolutely the run game needs to be better. It was where they fell extremely short. There's going to be a lot more explosiveness at receiver, especially with Dane Key. I think that he is going to be a much, much stronger piece.
And Isaiah Hunter, too.
Yeah. I think that their defense, like very sneakily, can be one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. Williams Winery comes in as a former 5-star recruit. He's currently not projected to start on our lads, but I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't change just because he's a super talented player. Deshaun McCullough, very athletic, rangy kid who's supposed to be playing that jack position for them. He's been a bit up and down in his career.
Yes.
I think that one thing that stands out to me, though, Blake, is that the willingness to bet on traits. Matt Rhule tried to do this with Eric Gilbert, and it didn't work. But going to guys that were once highly recruited, that are good athletes, that are coming from big programs, and giving them a shot. He's doing that with Deshaun McCullough. He's doing that with Elijah Pritchett. He's doing that again with Dane Key. There are opportunities to tap into that. It's a little bit of a risk-reward situation, but there is something to be gained from building a roster with that approach. And to some extent, it's produced success for him in the past.
Yeah, and listen, I want to get to one more thing about offensively before I move to your point on defense. Isaiah Hunter, Dane Key. Here's the truth. They got some weapons now.
Yeah.
They have some weapons that they can utilize. Joe, I am terrified for them, though, and I mean this. I am absolutely terrified for them that I don't know if – because you might be able to be better, okay, than some of the other teams. Joe, they were 103rd in the country in scoring offense, 23.5 points per game, 103rd. To give you an idea how bad some of that was, Joe, Utah was 102nd. Utah. Okay? Think of how bad that defense was. Joe, Stanford is in the same category last year with Nebraska. And that thing, here's the best one. You ready? Michigan. They had a walk-on quarterback. They had 22 points per game. The point that I'm trying to make here is you got some guys that can make some explosive plays. You got to do everything humanly possible to keep 15 up, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. Joe, you brought something up about them defensively, and you specifically talked about them up front. Now, they do bring in 8 players defensively from the transfer portal. Joe, I think they got to continue to just do what they're doing defensively. If there's one thing that I am not going to push back on Nebraska on, it's going to be them defensively. 8th in the country last year in rushing defense. I think their secondary's got to be a little bit better. They gave up some long plays when it mattered most. Joe, people better go back and turn on that Ohio State Nebraska film. I think people saw Nebraska being 7-6 and said to themselves, man, this team ain't no good. And so when Ohio State gets in a dogfight with them, they're like, oh man, Ohio State's playing with their food. No. Joe, go pull up that box score for Nebraska and Ohio State and go back and watch that game. They gave them everything that they wanted. Joe, I'm not going to – look, I can come in here and say this guy doesn't have a lot of production. That guy doesn't have a lot of production. I'm not going to hit on a staff, and I'm not going to criticize them when they did a lot of the same exact things that they did a year ago, and you're producing a really damn good unit defensively. Need to be a little bit more athletic, I think, defensively. Mm-hmm. I think they get that with a guy like Williams-Nwaneri. We'll see what they can do. Now, they do bring back Deshaun Singleton, the safety. Joe, he's a tackling machine. It's not going to light you up with stats, but he's going to come down in the box and absolutely blow your head off. I mean, just throwing this out there.
Yeah.
I saw Singleton in high school.
Was he a Louisiana kid?
For a time there, yes, at St. Helena. Okay. But, or to give you, I say like you would know, where Devonta Smith is from. Yeah, there were some time. I remember him being there and having time there. Joe, everybody missed on him. He had no SEC offers. He goes up to Nebraska. He will light your ask some dudes around Devonta Smith. Ask Devonta Smith's cousin, because my mom taught him in high school. He will blow your head off. I mean, this kid will light you up. So defensively, I don't know how worried I am about them.
One of the guys that I think is super underrated too on this defense, Cameron Lenhart, is a guy who I tracked as a freshman defensive tackle. I broke down his film, evaluated him when I was working and recommending prospects to agents, and he was one of the guys that caught my attention early on. He was an early contributor as a freshman, didn't play a ton, but you saw the athleticism. This is a year going into year 3 of his career as a junior where he can take that step. When you've got a guy that's been this athletic, that's been building his body, getting stronger, developing his technique, all of those things, this is a time when a guy like him could end up being a surprise, shocking player who ends up being one of the better defensive tackles in the Big Ten. I think that he's a very underrated piece. And I think that goes to say this defensive line could be a lot better than we're expecting. We don't really know the names. You know, the general national public, and the reason why I like doing these previews is that we get to kind of learn the roster a little bit more. We help teach other fans of the sport what you need to know. I know for a fact that most Big Ten fans, and especially most SEC fans and other fans in other conferences, don't know who a guy like Cameron Lenhart is. You know, there's a lot of potential to be had there.
You know, you bring that up, and we just got done talking about Nebraska defensively. Joe, the interesting thing about you bringing up Lenhart and that defense, here's the thing. When I look at them just as a whole, okay, and we bring up Singleton. We bring up Linhart. Okay, in 13 games, Joe, the stats are not going to stand out to you. But it's the same kind of deal to some extent, not on this level of steroids, but how Caleb Banks did not have the stats, but you turn on the film and then there you go. Right. And it's like, okay, if you're paper watching, then good on you. But you better turn on that film and you better turn it on very quickly. Man, I think they're going to be fine defensively. But the problem is, Joe, they can't be on the field as much as they were last year. Go look at the splits between offense and defensive time and possession, and go look at how much on the field Nebraska's defense was. It's insane. It cannot happen. It's the same thing that happened with Michigan. The same exact thing. You got to be able to convert on third downs, to move the sticks, and keep a really talented defense off the field. That is the goal. And Joe, here's why I don't think I'm going to be that high on them this year. You're going to have to show me that you can run the football to keep them off the field. I don't care what anybody tells me. There's one thing that has not changed in all the chaos that we've seen in college football. Joe, what teams lost last year when it mattered most? They could not run the football. What were the teams? It's the one-centric theme when we talk about ball in general. If you can't run that rock, you are in trouble as a team, as an outright team. LSU fell. Texas fell. Georgia fell. Why? Joe, they couldn't line up and get 5 yards when they needed it. Literally could not do it. So I know that that's the SEC, but it still has a problem with Nebraska.
Well, it applies more in the Big Ten, if anything.
Well, but they couldn't do it in the Big Ten. My only point here was this. Joe, I've heard millions of quarterbacks, not literally, but thousands of quarterbacks. Peyton Manning on Monday Night Football. We got to get this running game going. It helps out a young QB. Joe, if Raiola's going to have success, he's going to be able to have the hold on that rock. Now, here's the question on that. They went to Dana Holgorsen and kept him for a second year. I don't know if they even want to, if I'm being honest.
You think that they're just going to go try and air it out like crazy?
I do, because
it's plausible.
You
can't do that shit in November, but it's plausible.
Why is no air raid teams defensively, Joe, top defensively? Why does it never happen?
Because they're on the field too long.
They're on the field too long. Joe, you had that 2019 LSU team.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Stingley, Grant Delpit. Name the dudes that were out there. Kerry Vincent, all starters in the NFL. Patrick Queen, Jacob Phillips. Name all of them. Want to know why they didn't have a top defense? They were scoring too goddamn quickly. They were off the field too goddamn quickly. You want to know why Derek Stingley, one of the best scorers in the NFL right now, had troubles? He was exhausted.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what do we like? Here's how I feel. You know how when we talk about chemistry in teams, I feel like everything that you build defensively does not match up to what you're trying to build offensively. You're hiring a coordinator in reference to Dana Holgorsen to build off of a quarterback instead of what is best for your team.
I understand that sentiment, but can we talk about the real craziness that is their schedule this upcoming year? We've talked about a lot of teams that have easy schedules. They have
let's talk about it.
An insane schedule. Cincinnati versus Akron versus Houston Christian versus at home Michigan, bye week versus Michigan State. So they haven't had an away game yet. At Maryland, at Minnesota, those are their first two away games. Versus Northwestern, versus USC, at UCLA, that's their one West Coast trip. At Penn State versus Iowa. They do not play Indiana, Oregon, or Ohio State. They don't have to go to Washington, and they only have one trip where they have to travel to go to play UCLA of all teams, which is certainly beatable because we're not that high on this UCLA program. Maybe they're good with Nico, but whatever. There is a world. I'm a lot higher on Nebraska than you are. There is a world going into
Don't say it.
that Penn State game that they could be undefeated. There's legitimate, like, this roster's nothing like special. Like, I'm being very honest. This is not a top 5 roster in the Big Ten right now. It's not. And Nebraska fans, I hope that you guys have enough self-awareness to understand that too. I think that Nebraska fans are smart football fans to realize that there are holes compared to some of these other teams. But if Indiana can make it as fun, we people keep trying to bring up how like who could be the next Indiana this year that is a really easy schedule that ends up having a really good record. I think it could be Nebraska. That Penn State game is probably not going to go very well. It's probably not. And we're probably going to, after that game, be sitting debating, should Nebraska get into the college football playoff if things go as well as they could? But like tell me where are the games that for certain they're not winning outside of that Penn State game?
That they're for sure not winning.
Out of all the games I just named there.
I don't know if they're outright going to beat Michigan.
They get them at home with a freshman quarterback.
Outright?
I think Michigan's going to be better, but they've got a lot of stuff to figure out. That's week 4.
Nebraska doesn't?
Nebraska's at least in year 2 of their quarterback.
Hold on. Pause. That defensive line that we saw obliterate Elijah Pritchett in a bowl game, yeah, I do think that that Michigan could get after that ass. Joey allowed 3 sacks.
I understand that there's going to be a lot of turnover with this Michigan defense. I don't think we've done a Michigan preview.
Yeah, we haven't.
There's a lot of turnover.
All right. I'm going to let the Nebraska fans hate me today. Here we go. Matt Rhule, you're out here talking about you're taking shots at the SEC with about 9 conference games, and this is your schedule?
Okay, forget that for a second.
No, I'm not going to. And
you're playing to my point, though. You're playing to my point. This is a 10-2 schedule.
I am playing to your point, but I've been waiting all day to tell you this. At the end of the show, I will be tweeting out something about Matt Rhule, and I will be bringing up the schedule. You keep bitching about 9 conference games, and this is your fucking schedule? Spare me, big dog. Spare me. Well, I do agree with you on one thing.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be in playoff eliminator games because they're going to beat up on some of these teams. Does Jonathan Smith and Michigan State figure something out? I don't know where those teams are going to be. But here's what I know. Your offensive line keeps getting dominated like that, and you're not winning shit.
That's understandable, but I don't think that there are 3 games on here that have formidable defenses potentially. Michigan, maybe USC, and definitely Penn State. The rest of these defenses, nothing truly scares me about any of these defenses. Maybe Michigan State is suddenly better. There's nothing scary on this.
It's weak. It's weak.
My point, 10-2.
I mean, because Maryland's lost a lot. Northwestern's Northwestern.
10-2. I'm telling you right now, 11-1.
They're not going 10-2. They're not going 10-2. I'll give you 9-3. I'm not conceding 10-2. They're not making the playoff.
All right. I think it's possible.
You think Nebraska's going to the playoff?
They have a better. It doesn't matter if they're one of the best teams in the country. We spent a whole 20 minutes talking about strength of schedule.
Well, let me ask you this before we get out of here.
Okay.
Then do they deserve it?
That's not the point. No, they probably. I literally just said that they won't be one of the 12 best teams in the country. They won't, but they're going to have one of the best records at the end of the year. They probably will if this goes according to plan.
I would want to play that schedule.
I think most teams would.
You think on Big Ten Radio right now that they're going to be when this is on XM Radio? You think they're going to be yelling at us?
Probably. Well, they're going to be yelling at you. I got the right take.
I will not concede. We'll see you tomorrow, man. Not tomorrow. What am I doing?
No, we're back tomorrow. It's Wednesday.
We are back tomorrow. See you on Wednesday. Y'all have a good one. Peace.